Welcome. I'm delighted to be joined for this next Skills Change Lives episode by Caroline Feraday, television and radio broadcaster extraordinaire who studied for a City and Guilds qualification in radio and journalism at Mid-Kent College in the 1990s. So it might seem quite a long way away, but we'll go back and reflect on those heydays with Caroline shortly. But this qualification played a significant role in launching her career in broadcasting, so much so that this is the first Skills Change Lives episode that we've been doing across a Zoom, simply because there's 8 hours currently separating Caroline and I in our day, simply because Caroline is now based over in Los Angeles, so she's a global broadcaster. But throughout her career, she's worked across stints with the BBC, Radio 5 Live, Sky One, ITV, Channel 4, pretty much all the UK main channels. But she's now, as I say, based in Los Angeles, where she works for KCLU, which I think she'll go on to tell us a little bit more about, is a little bit like working for the BBC. And finally, not only has she recently won the 2024 LA Press Club Audio Journalist of the Year, this is the third time on the trot that she has won this very significant award. So suffice to say, a journalist very much at the pinnacle of her career, and I hope it all sort of started when she embarked on her City and Guilds back in the 1990s. Let's find out from Caroline herself. Caroline, welcome. Good morning to you, actually.
Gosh, yes, thank you. Good morning. It's funny, the Journalist of the Year award, because as you said, back in those days when I was doing my City and Guilds, if somebody could have said one day you'll just get to go to this awards ceremony in Los Angeles and you'll see somebody else win, I'd have thought, wow, that's amazing. Surely that's not going to come my way. And my boss is very proud to say that, it is a once in a career award, and I've won it 3 years in a row.
Yes,
I don't get it either.
Yes,
but there we
it's amazing. And actually, I was going to say, does that mean you've had 3 glorious outfits as well?
You do get to go to a nice do, but it is funny because it's Southern California. It's the second biggest media market in the US. And I'm just doing almost exactly what I was doing when I was at college,
Really?
like it's the same. I'm just doing it here.
Yeah, no, isn't that amazing? Well, look, let's get into that, because I think it is amazing, and of course the whole point of our Skills Change Life series is to use our fabulous, better known alumni who are doing things, at the top of their career choices, and act as a real inspiration and aspiration for all those young people who may one day also want to go and win that award at least once, if not emulate your 3 times victory. But it doesn't sound like that would be very easy to do. So look, I gave a very brief bio into your career, but what really did attract you at a very early age into a career in radio and journalism, Caroline?
I don't know. It's a mystery, isn't it? Because sometimes you hear people say you can't have a career in the media unless you know someone, or So I didn't know anyone who had a job, anything like that. My dad was a civil servant. My mum's a teacher. And I just loved listening to the radio. I could go into all sorts of psychological things about when I was at secondary school. I think I was a bit isolated because I was bullied. So I started to listen to the radio at night. And that was quite a good friend to me. And from that, understood the power of radio as a medium. Through that, and also the person who was on radio happened in Kent at that time in the evenings, is an excellent broadcaster, who is somebody I've gone to advice many times myself now. And I think there was a little bit of me that thought I'd really like to meet him, but I realized that if I met him as like a fan, it would be weird.
You needed an answer of him. Yeah.
I needed a job. But also I just developed a passion for it, and I would go and very, in when I was 15, 16, I was DJing and working with music, and my 16th birthday present was a DJ set, and I would go and DJ at parties. And arguably now I'm editing stories, and some of those stories are heavy news stories, and some of those stories are lighter music pieces. I won an award for a story I did with Boy George from Culture Club, and it's the same skill set. It's me sitting down, playing with music, editing it, and still getting the same joy from like it sounding good as much as asking the questions. Like that's what I like about radio, I think, is, it's this whole journey of sound. I don't know if that answered your question.
It's brilliant, actually. Well, not only did it answer it, and we will dig in a little bit more anyway as we come through. But I was really interested in your very honest, and thank you for being so honest about some of the more psychological reasons that you've maybe thought about as you've got older about why did it or how did it even start, and that very real honest. We know that mental health and well-being has become much more prevalent, much more talked about, much more known. But for you to admit that possibly your source of comfort for you was the radio, and actually it's ended up being the very thing you work in. And I wonder actually how much that could be true for so many young
Yeah.
people who might be listening to this interview. So
Yeah,
thank
it
you
was
for opening
really
that up.
it was a hobby, but also thinking back, I went to this very, very academic school, right? You went on to do academic things. It's something like the sixth best school in the country. It's a very academic school, and they wanted me to do maths and physics at A level. I'm good.
Journalism then.
And I went to my teachers I went to a grammar school in Kent, and I went to my teacher and said, I want to work in radio. And they said, that'll never happen for you. And I remember clearer than anything sitting on the school bus, and someone had the prospectus for Mid Kent College, and I flicked through it, and there was a picture of somebody wearing headphones with the mixing desk in front of them, and the City and Guilds course for radio and journalism. And I sat there on the school bus and I clung onto this thing because I saw somebody doing what I wanted to do. And I saw that as my path to getting
Right.
to do what I wanted to do. So it was actually a very clear moment. It wasn't
Yeah.
an accident that I happened to do a City and Guilds. It was a moment where I saw somebody doing what I wanted to do, and
Brilliant.
a path to doing it where everybody had given me blocks and told me I couldn't and I wouldn't and it wouldn't happen for me.
Yeah, no,
And
it's amazing to hear that story, actually, Caroline, because I'd like to be able to say to you that today, several decades on, that's different. But unfortunately, I don't think it is. I think, we still are not helping young people make or feel they've got choice, actually. And what you've just really talked to there is a genuine, true vocational pathway that led to you then having, as we've already heard through that short bioga, gave an incredibly successful career. But so, you talked as well at the beginning there about an influencer and the journalist or the broadcaster that you used to listen to and in Mid Kent. I mean, that clearly ended up being a bit of a role model. Was that before you'd started the course? It sounded like it was, or did you carry on using mentoring or the mentoring from, I think it's a him, that kind of helped create that environment for you to be successful at the
yeah,
very
look, it
early
was
days?
somebody I listened to on the radio and then later went to work with. And he's still on the radio. It's a guy called Ian Collins who used to be on the radio in Kent. And then we went on to work together, and he's continued. And I just heard in him somebody who I still think is an excellent broadcaster. But at that time, it was, whether it is you identify with a singer and the words they put in a song, or whatever it was about his artistry, I related to. And I can remember when I made career decisions later down the line, because we did go on to work together and become very good friends, is that I'd ring him up and say, oh, what should I do about this? What should I take this or should I go there? And because I was always very keen, and I think even in that moment, I like to kind of evolve as a broadcaster, because if you work in an industry like that, it's always changing.
Yeah.
And so you can either get left behind and say it was better in my day, or you can grow and go with it and, adapt to the technology and adapt to the new way of doing things. And I think that's really important. But, and I will say this, like the key skills that I learned, and I cannot, and I'm not saying it because you're here, what City and Guilds gave me was not only those key skills, but the confidence that I could do it for a living. That this passion, that this hobby was something I could do for a job, that I could pay my bills doing it.
Well, look, I think that's absolutely been so well demonstrated. And I was going to ask you actually how important was the course at the college and the qualification. And it sounds like obviously it was genuinely the sort of starting point that did enable you to have skills that would go on to change your life in lots of brilliant ways, including change where you even live today. So fundamental. So I suppose, you talked a little bit about some of those grounding skills. What would you be saying to someone who might be listening to this and is a aspiring journalist, broadcaster? What do you think are those real core skills and that you learned right from the outset and they've held true all the way along so far in your career?
Curiosity and being willing to say yes, no problem, and then figure it out. Like you'll
Brilliant.
be forever given things you do not want to do. Don't fancy. Don't
Chase
really
a
want to
story
want to
about
get
a cat up a
home.
tree.
Yeah, don't want to prioritize. Oh my gosh, it's funny you should say that. When I'd worked kind of doing some stuff over here actually for like GMTV back in the day, which is now Good Morning Britain, various other things, and then I was asked to go and work for BBC Southeast, based back where I grew up, and somebody from the local newspaper clearly wanted some sort of sensational line in their interview, and they wanted me to say something negative about this role that I was very excited and happy to be doing. And they said, but you're going from covering Hollywood to covering cats up a tree. How's that going to be? And I said, well, you work for the local newspaper, you tell me. So, bring a bit of sass, but
Yeah.
treat people like with a lot of respect. The good stories to cover, and I think people get very excited because there are fun parts to the job of, I don't know, covering a red carpet or seeing somebody famous, and those are the bits that people are interested in. But the real stuff comes from people's stories that you wouldn't hear otherwise, and having the opportunity to shine a light on those stories and remembering to have empathy. So nurture your empathy, nurture your curiosity, like keep evolving with that. And I go back and listen to stories that have won awards, and I wouldn't tell it the same way a second time.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
like, it's writing a song. It's you gotta just almost like, particularly in live news where you've got to make decisions real quick. And the most important thing is that your story gets on the air in the time slot, because it can be perfect, but if you deliver it 3 minutes too late, it doesn't matter. No one's going to get to see it.
Yeah.
So you have to be really good at making decisions that you commit to, at understanding how you came to those decisions, and also understanding it is an art form to story tell, no matter how you're doing it. Like, it's a creative art form, and you can learn the rules, and then you can learn when not to follow the rules might be more powerful. So there are, we learned the rules at City and Guilds, but I also had a journalism lecturer who's great. It was a guy called Murray, and he was awesome. Who was a real world journalist who worked, and so he also understood that, it sometimes, there is, I don't know, a degree of irreverence required or creativity required to kind of get there. But if you go through life treating people with respect, that the same person that I listened to on the radio when I was in my teens is still somebody I work with now in my 40s.
Yeah.
So understand, don't burn your bridges.
Yes, no, no, no. Well, they always say, don't they, that saying, isn't it? Be careful who you upset on the way up, because you might see them, or might not want to see them
You
on the
will
way back
see them,
down. Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
even might,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
will,
yeah.
and you will cross paths with them. So, and I think people generally are pretty respectful and decent to live with. The nature, I think, of journalism has changed a lot, where journalists have really sort of turned into the bad guys publicly. There's a lot of like, oh, we don't trust journalists and we don't like that, and that's a new thing to come up against, or certainly
Yeah, that's true.
new recent thing to come up against, where I'll
So,
be out on a story and people go, oh, well, we don't trust you, or this, and I'm like, I'm not a tabloid hack. Like, I'm
no,
here to hear what you've got to say and to tell your story, and you got to go in listening to what people have got to say and then tell that. If you've written the narrative in your head and all you're doing is going out to get somebody to back up the story you've already written, that's not journalism. That's a different thing altogether. And so there is a degree of kind of uh chutzpah maybe involved in that, and kind of
yeah.
being
Well, I
strong
think
and
as well. I think really what you're getting at there. I think there are lots of things. I mean, I love what you're presenting there, which is almost a form of life skills, and skills that you need to apply whatever career you might choose to be in. But actually, what really comes out, especially for broadcasting and journalism, is that authenticity and that ability to be relatable and to relate someone's story in a very authentic way, but a way that, yes, absolutely has to capture the story and has to capture the imagination. Otherwise, you're not going to get your
yeah.
readers or your listeners.
It's
So
also not glamorous, and quite often you'll find yourself on a long car ride thinking you need to pee in a
yes.
cup.
I was going to ask you about that. So, because you've mentioned a lot of brilliant skills there, that some of those skills, or a lot of those skills, were really your foundation skills that you might say that you learned through the course and the City and Guilds course and through college. But of course, there is something about resilience that's coming through, I think, in what you're saying, that real grit and resilience that you've got to really dig quite deeply into. But just going back to some of the stories, and I know you probably won't dish the dirt on this interview. We're not expecting you to either. It's not
Oh,
a
I
gossip.
will go
Oh, you will.
on.
Oh, go on. Well, no. What was I was going to? You mentioned Boy George earlier, but just generally, what's been there? What's been your best story that you've really enjoyed, or interview you've really enjoyed, and conversely, what's been the one you haven't, and maybe why, if you're willing to say a little bit about that?
I mean, Boy George, loved growing up. I'm very much dating myself during all of this interview, but I
You're in good
have
company, don't worry.
shamelessly exploited my position in the media to meet my heroes. And I've got to do that on a number of occasions, and I appreciate that immensely, and those have been real fun. Like, I interviewed Kevin Bacon recently. There's a do that happens here at Kevin Costner's house. I get to go to that,
Oh.
and like Oprah will be there,
Any
and
invites? Any invites?
the Harkles will be there.
Yeah,
Those things are the
sure.
funner side, right?
Yeah,
They're not always the most interesting stories, but they're the ones that people want to hear about and be like, woo,
sure. Yeah,
what they like in real life,
yeah.
kind of. One of the stories I did here that moved me the most. There was it's a terrible story, really. Two little kids, Mark and Jacob Iskander, and they were knocked down whilst crossing the road on a marked crossing during the pandemic, by a woman in a residential neighborhood who was doing freeway speeds after a night out drinking. And that woman, Rebecca Grossman, was connected to a very powerful family, had a lot of money, tried everything she could to not stand trial. She was tried for their murder and convicted of their murders, to spoil the end of this story. But this went on for sort of 4 years. On top of that, it happened in the neighborhood where I lived. It was very much a sort of David and Goliath story, where this gracious, wonderful mum who was with them, by the way, when they were knocked down. She darted out the way with her youngest kid. The other two were behind her, and and I took my time to gain the trust of the mum. And this is where it's sort of almost old-fashioned journalism, and then that sort of sounds cynical, and I don't mean that I did it to exploit her in any way. I wanted her to know that she could trust talking to me, that and that's like playing a much not playing a much longer game. I would say that to her, actually. I'm looking for the right words, but to grow that relationship over
Relationship, yeah.
a number of years in an environment where news is like on the day, do this, do this, do this, do this, and like you're never thinking about, well, okay, but this is a very sensitive story and it requires a different approach.
Gosh, yes.
And later down the line, when it came to be, she felt more confident about giving an interview, she gave her interview to me because I was the person she felt confident doing that with. And I tell that as a sort of, story really about sort of building relationships, getting to know people, not being in a hurry to kind of
the story for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't always get the time for that. And that is where I work for public radio here. It's publicly funded, and certainly, public broadcasters in the UK, I see that they still have the time to do it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And also the power of local news is really important. Anyway, we then went through this trial. It was very traumatic, and I think they had this after the trial, and I was there for the verdict, and I mean, it was really an horrendous trial with lots of quite egregious behaviour from the defendant in terms of her relationship with the truth, and the fact that she's never taken responsibility or apologized or just shown any decency towards that family, and had all this money and power to try and navigate a way through that. And so yes, I was there for the verdict, and that was a full-on day where, I'm doing this alone against media organizations that have all these people, to do it, and it was just all in the prep and like being ready,
intensity,
ready to
yeah.
go. And then for the sentencing, I sat there as 20 friends, family from other kids who were friends with them at school, to their teachers, their Sunday school teachers, their grandma, their aunts and uncles, all shared their grief with the judge. And in all of my years in journalism, I think we've established that I am quite old now. In all of my years of journalism, that is the most traumatic.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and this was earlier this year, and then owing to my timekeeping, I was not sat in the jury stand with the other journalists, but I was in the seat right in front of the mum. And so Rebecca Grossman, who had not spoken during this entire trial, she never gave evidence in her own defense, turned to speak to the mum, and I'm sat right in this moment of this happening with this woman who is shackled, talking to the mother whose kids she's killed.
Grieving. Yeah.
So that was a lot, but I'm proud of the work that I did to bring that story, because it meant so much to our listeners to know what was going on. They really cared and rallied
to know
for
the
that.
truth, and us to have the truth. I mean, that's what people most value and want, don't they, from journalism, is to know and have the truth. Yes, there's always a story and an angle, but all of us are looking for that truth. And
just come at it with heart and like just come at it with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was a lot. If you're asking what are the stories that have
No, no, but look,
had
that's
a lot of
very
impact.
powerful, and you've
Yeah.
covered a lot in there about the sort. Again, you talked earlier about empathy and all the other things we were talking about earlier on, but you've in that story you've brought to life all of those skills, even though ordinarily you'd love to not, in many ways, have had to even cover that story because you'd
No
rather that
one.
outcome wasn't
Yeah.
the outcome. No one wants
Yeah.
that, but to be able to do that in the skillful way that you were able to, I think
You have to go in.
illuminates.
Oh, you're very kind. Sorry, this is the danger of Zoom, isn't it? But you have to go in to situations where you want to comfort someone.
Mm.
And my goodness me, the times I want to come, but you also want to hear what they've got to say. And so there's a dance you do, this kind of dance of just allowing somebody to share their grief because you want to shut them down like you might if you were their friend. Don't cry. Here's a cup of tea. Like you do need to let people hear the impact of drink driving, of not
Mm.
taking responsibility, of these things, right? If you're going to do that. And so you have to go into these situations, and I've had to go and knock on strangers' doors when their most loved people have passed away, and you have to go in with enormous
Yeah,
sensitivity to
absolutely,
that situation and
absolutely.
humanity into that
Yeah.
situation.
No, no, look, that amazing and amazing way to bring very much to life the reality. So thank you, because that's what we're really trying to do as well through these episodes to really make the careers that people have had in them at the top of the game very, very real. So thank you for doing that. And if we can just sort of explore another theme that came up actually indirectly in that conversation was about how journalism has changed and broadcasting has changed, and that news in the minute, everybody wants the quick fix and the multiple channels. I mean, how do you cope with that? And of course, they're all new things that new skills that you've had to acquire along the way. You haven't gone back to college for those skills, right? So, what do you think has most changed? Probably an obvious question to ask a journalist, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think has most changed journalism? I guess technology, but for the good and the better or worse? What's your view on that,
I
Caroline?
guess it is the technology, and it is the fact now that somebody doing the job has to be multi-skilled. And it's interesting, the industry here in the United States, I find to be years behind the industry in the UK.
Okay,
And that
interesting.
those roles are still quite separate. They'll do like a paper edit, and then someone writes it, and they have like a field producer, and then they have like they still might have a sound man. So we don't have that in UK journalism. And I think in some ways that's what's served me well, is having that background in the UK and training in the UK industry. But it is changing here as well, in that there are more people who are in front of the camera setting it up, but they're also like, they're video journalists. They're filming it to themselves, and not taking a cameraman and a crew, and then editing it themselves. And that is, getting more and more so. But I also think people are quite willing to do that. That those kind of short TikTok,
Yes.
videos. Everybody's a content creator now,
Yes, exactly.
and the tools in which to do that are so much easier. Goodness me, when I started out, to edit videotape was nowhere near as simple as doing it on
You
your
were still
phone
cutting and
the way
splicing.
it is now, right? All right, we're old. I'm old. We've got it.
Well, I am. And look, if you're old, I'm even a decade older. So don't you worry. You were probably doing something more sophisticated than cutting and splicing, which is what
No,
I would
I
have been
did used
doing.
to edit with a razor blade and some tape. but
Uh,
but yeah, I mean, so the technology has changed, and therefore, being multi-skilled has changed. I happen to like that. I think that it gives you a bit more control over the finished product. If you are confident in your storytelling, you kind of want to have that, but you also want to have a good editor and good people who are part of that collaborative process, who
yes.
just have ideas and where you can still keep listening. Like, I still hear people now at this point in my career, I'm like, that's a good idea. Like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to see how writing that way works, or try doing it different. I'm very open to kind of not
Yeah.
saying, well, this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way we're going
Well,
to
you
do it.
said, if you don't
There's
mind, you
lots
said
of
earlier.
those.
Yeah, no, you said earlier something really important, I think, generally, and I think it's again true for pretty much, well, probably a life lesson, but certainly true for lots of careers or jobs, is stay curious. And that sounds to me, be curious. And you said that was one of the fundamental skills at the beginning of your career, and it sounds like that's something that's carried you through. And I think that's true for all of us, because let's be honest, skills are changing at such a rapid pace because of technology, because of AI. There is no industry, no job that's going to be untouched in some shape or form. But if you can stay curious and see a way of applying it in a way that benefits you or what you're trying to do for your customers, in your case listeners or readers, then that can only be a good thing. So look, and again, another angle you brought in earlier, I just want to cover a little bit, and as we start to bring what's been a brilliant conversation, almost don't want it to end, really. Certainly not before I get my invite to the Kevin Costner party. But no, joking apart, I had to get that one in. Is, what is the difference? I mean, let me first ask you, what do you miss about not working in the UK? And then conversely, what is it you love about now being in the US? And you've been there now a number of years, haven't you,
11
Caroline?
years.
Yeah,
11
wow.
years.
Yeah.
You almost have to start again, and then it kind of takes 10 years till you're where you want to be. I think that's the generally accepted sort of pattern for how it works. I like to make my life difficult. Could have just coasted along happily at home. What do I miss? Pickled onion monster munch.
Well, there you go. We can sort that. Don't worry.
Getting a lunch break.
Yes. Mm.
Having more leave. So I miss a lot of things about, cultural things about being in the UK, and my friends and my family. But I still feel very connected to it because the age in which we live in is such that I can be. And I'm lucky enough that I still do quite a bit of work in the UK, and
So you get to come back, and
well, no, I have to do it over Zoom.
Of course you do.
Over the Zoom-a-loom. Do you know, I think it was really the pandemic where it just became okay for Zoom to be on television. Up until then, we were trying out all these things, even, 3D TV, or everything had to be sharper, brighter, better, in better quality. And then everyone went, well, we can't go to work, so it's going to be a bit fuzzy, and it's going to be from someone's front room. And everyone was like, yeah, it's fine, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't really know what's around the corner, do you? But anyway,
No.
but the weather here is nice. And I went to the beach at the weekend, and some dolphins went past.
Oh, wow.
And so, if you make plans, they're not going to be rained off. There are those things. It is definitely harder socially to live in a place where people have to drive everywhere, and there are those things, and you're starting from scratch with that. And my best friend's been my best friend since I was 11 and lives in England, so there are times where you're like, I just want to go to this concert with you, or I want to go to the beach with you.
Yeah.
So those things are hard.
There's trade-offs, aren't there? Always trade-offs.
Yeah, but I would have been, I tell myself that I would have been happy just getting a job in radio. And I really would have been. And so a lot of it, I've just continued, it's because I've continued to enjoy doing what I do. And I didn't want to stagnate in that. And some of it is just the pieces falling into place.
Yeah. Yeah, some of it's just opportunity sometimes, isn't it? I mean, a lot of our careers. Yeah, I was going to say, a bit of self-belief, a bit of maybe even sometimes fake it till you make it. There's always something around that. I think that's Americanism term, but in a way that there is substance towards that fake till you make it. If you see what I mean, you have to believe, not let that imposter syndrome. Really, is probably the better way that I would describe it.
I can remember someone saying, it's that question, what would you be doing if you weren't on the radio? I'd be doing a job dreaming I was on the radio. like I wouldn't be doing something else that I would enjoy as much. I'd be there thinking, I wish I'd pursued
Yes,
this.
exactly.
And so to go back to City and Guilds, because that's why we're here, to have that, not only that belief, but to be treated like that had worth, and that was a path and a job. And also, I know this sounds awful, but because rather than being in school for A levels, I was at a college, I just had to be there for my lessons. I didn't have to sit about and be in that building. So I could go and do shifts at my local radio station in between, and kind of, so I could kind of like hybrid this situation where I was gaining real life work experience at the same time as earning my City and Guilds
Yeah.
qualification.
So you were in
And
many
that
ways doing an
had a lot of
apprenticeship in a
value.
way. Yeah, you
Yeah,
were almost
yeah,
doing an earn and learn apprenticeship, but you were doing a really workplace route, which back
yeah,
in the 90s, sorry, I'm not trying to age you again, but but no, back in the 90s, was still relatively novel to what we're actually still now
yeah.
trying to do.
I
And
think
here
it's
we
great.
are in 2024, and what we're aspiring to do is do exactly more of that. And I love the way you've just described that belief, because of course our strapline is believe you can. So,
Yeah.
Caroline, I think on that note, what a brilliant way to end what's been a fantastic conversation, and a force to tour that you are for everything you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing your observations. Thank you for being a City and Guilds alumni, and we're very proud to have you as one of the family. So, and good luck with the rest of your career and all those awards to come.
Thank you. Who knew that a prospectus on a bus could breed so much?
There you go.
Here we
Brilliant.
still are. Oh, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
lovely. Thank you, Caroline. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. It's all mine, and I'm glad we managed to make it happen. Take care.
Hey, take care.